Okay, I know it's the last day, but I do want to wrap things up really well. Even within the other trainings, there are some aspects that I have a hard time finding space for. If I was to have a choice, this would be the most interesting, relevant, and important. It's enabling, it's empowering, it's very insightful. It answers certain questions. Yesterday, the question is, what is the point? But one of the interesting questions that has been asked is, do the movements mean anything? Are they making it up? Do they mean anything? Should we answer that? Do we go into it? Is it okay? All right. So we will attempt to answer it still through the eyes of the baby. That's why I would like to go into it. Like, it would help us understand, what do they see? What did we see when we were 1, when we were 6 months, and so on. All right. I want to observe some of the inner dance movements. Like, I want to look at how the energy looked like over the years. So I have some videos on my laptop that I've been screening in the last trainings. You can then think from within through observation. Okay, does that mean anything? When you do that, when you do that, when you do that, did they mean anything? So let me pull things out, whatever's here over the years.
Mother Earth and the beauty that we see and the abundance that we have is so important, and I feel like that is my purpose. Using who I am in any way, and I am many things. So, and I possess many gifts, and that is a way I can be of service. And being here has been the ultimate answer.
So these are mostly what is happening in 2012, 11, 10, 2013. So I didn't actually continue documenting. So there are no documentations between 2013 to about 2019. So we have to jump to what the bodies look like after the energy was getting spread. Okay, so I think it's just good to have an image to hold, like a set of images, and then you just start to mix them up in the mind. What you can observe, though, is in the original versions of this energy, there was an actual seeming language that was communicative in nature, that seemed to hold meanings, and later the movements became more repetitive. There's a redundancy in the way we see the images, especially as it's being displayed in the medium of Instagram. Everyone's movements now seem to look alike. But when you do your research and when you look at where this started, there was diversity. No one's movements ever looked like anyone else. So I'm giving this to you as maybe a way to hold the process so that you can help to diversify it once again, because a lot of you are coming from different parts of the world, and you might have, like possible questions. What is the movement that comes from that land or from that specific like group, interpretive community or whatnot? Like, we would need some science at this point to go with the spiritual or energetic stuff that's taking place. Let me just see if this connects again. Okay, so the two questions were, what's the point? What is a point? Beyond just it being like a dot or like a period. Is there more point to the point? And then do the movements mean anything? For us to ask what is the point, we need to understand what is a point anyway. So when you look at a point, it looks like a point. But maybe when you look at a point from inside, and probably some of you have visited the point in some of the last journeys we had, maybe this morning you might have gone inside something, or yesterday maybe you went inside something, maybe in some of the other inner dances you entered the point. The point has actual names in some of the spaces in science that have been trying to understand what is the point. But remember, we spoke about the monad. The monad in philosophy is the irreducible point. In philosophy, thinkers have asked, okay, if I keep dividing like a particle, and if I can't divide it anymore, the smallest point would be the monad. So I think that's a really useful thing to think about. So in philosophy, they did ask, what is the monad? Is it maybe like a word? Some people think it's a person. You know, is it a place? Is it a day? To do with time and space. So think of language for one. What would be more of a point? Would it be like a letter? Would it be a phoneme or a morpheme, which is even smaller than a letter? Would it be a word? Would it be a sentence? Would it be a book? When you think about it, the letter is quite elementary, but what is more complete? Let's say compare that to a word. Is a word more complete than a letter? In terms of the point, what is more pointed? A sentence, is that more complete than a word? So many thinkers believe that the sentence is actually more monadic than the word, because the sentence completes from the beginning to the end. The point is there. A word just opens up to so many other points. So in a way, a book, a complete narrative might even be more monadic, so that maybe you need to go through an entire life to get to the point. And when you haven't journeyed to the end, you haven't actually created the point yet. There's no point yet. You haven't lived it. So a monad could be big, in a way it could also be small. We would have to maybe help to heal the mind-body problem somewhere in this questioning, because that has been wounding us, right? The mind and the body have been separate. Is the mind more the point, or is the body the point? Somehow you are experiencing that I am the point, like I'm complete. If I consider myself as a dot, then I could, within a certain dimensionality, I could also witness myself as a complete whole. My whole story is the point. It's complete from beginning to end. And somehow my body and my mind can represent those. So there's something about embodied cognition, a branch in science that looks at mind and body, embodied cognition, that's bringing about a possible solution to what is the point. So we need to bring up certain terms. Let me maybe suggest some of those terms that may be useful for us. One possible point would be called a conceptual domain. A domain is like a kingdom, it's an area. So a concept doesn't just have to be like an idea. It doesn't have to be just a word. Think of a word, think of any concept, think of any ideas. It has a domain. And you can explore that domain. How long can you explore any single domain? I believe any domain that you can think about could take you forever. Like you're a domain. Let's talk about you. Let's get to know you. Can we get to know you in a day? An hour? Could we get to know you in a year? Would you stop talking about yourself at a particular point? Okay, I'm done. This is my essence. Is there a boundary? Is there a limit? You're infinite. But then think about other concepts. It could be the Flying Dutchman. It could be Santa Claus. It could be Donald Trump. It could be the United States of America. All of those are infinite domains. Every single point is an infinite domain, and you can never exhaust the domain. There's no finite boundaries. They're all infinite, and they're all, as we were discussing yesterday, maybe they're all actually the same point, substituting each other. So one thing that we would bring up, and this is mentioned by Claudia, is there's something called the conceptual metaphor, and that would be super duper helpful in understanding the inner dance, like the nature of the movements and the relationship between the mind and the body. So what you're actually uncovering in the process is a conceptual metaphor. So we would look at what is a conceptual metaphor. There's something else that I would love to look at, and it's called an image schema. Okay? And overall, what we are trying to uncover here is the nature of the map. Your mind is mapped out. Your mind is a map. Your body is a map. It could be the earth, but it could also be the map of the earth. And you're learning to read the map through what you call the energy and the movements. Okay, so let's define initially, let's say, what is an image schema. Let me pull out the Wikipedia definition, just so I'm not making anything up. An image schema is a recurring structure within our cognitive process which establishes patterns of understanding and reasoning. So it's something that's recurring. It's a pattern that allows us to understand everything that we think about and hold as meaning. That's an image schema. Anything that repeats, anything that is a pattern, anything that also helps you to organize and structure what you know, that's an image schema. Now, what's important and what would help you to understand why we're bringing this up is an image schema was planted there when you were a baby. And it was planted there through your bodily interactions. Mostly movement, but partly to do also with the senses. Okay, so here's one way to look at cognitive development. There is a triumvirate that allows cognitive development to occur. Perception needs to be linked with motoric experience and sensory experience. This is the original pyramid. So this links together. What you see or what you know is linked with what you're doing, how you're moving, and what you're feeling. All of these are happening at the same time. This is how you formulate a mind. So here what we see is mind and body need to be linked together. They have to be linked together at a certain point before they were unlinked in Western philosophy, Western reasoning. Literally, your visual cortex is made possible through your motor cortex. You cannot really vision things without imagining your relationship with it in movement, because the world isn't really just a picture, it's a series of pictures. There's a sequence. And for you to make meaning out of that, you need to be accessing the part of your brain that allows you to move from image to image. Okay? So that's some basic understanding of what an image schema is. When you look at an image, like that image, it's not just an image. Were you to look at, like even this scene, like me, like that, this, that, you have to activate your dance, your movement, for you to be able to imagine what that might mean to you. Like inside you, you're interacting with all the images in your mind. There are close linkages there. It's linking, motoric function, and perception. The visual cortex is really just linked together. It's just linked together with even like the muscles in your eye that control the eye movements. It's directly linked to the visual cortex. Just like the auditory cortex, like your ears and your auditory cortex are very linked to your neck muscles. So when you're listening, it's like you don't think about it because they're so closely intertwined together. For you to hear better and for you to see better, there has to be these direct linkages. They develop together, in other words, for you to not just expand, but also to learn to focus, to see what you need to see, to filter things out, right? Meaning it's so movement-based. Everything's actually a huge, complex dance. And your body, like, you know, your body does all these. It's incredible.
So when we talk about movement inducing thought,
Yes.
is the
Yes, exactly.
So the movement is in a way producing the images?
Yes. And even thought itself. We established in that audio that we listened to, thought is slower than movement. So the vibration of movement, which is to say there's actually much more information in the movement. Movement is not just you moving your body, it's movement across space. It's making the space have a sense. So when you take away the movement of a small child, you actually close their mind. Every time a child doesn't have the freedom to move across the space, the mind of a child actually has a hard time conceptualizing, because concepts, in fact, begin with motoric function. Think of the baby. Well, you know, it's moving around. And
so now that you say that, I wonder, like newborn babies, they're swaddled.
yeah.
What does that do?
In the West.
Yeah.
In the West.
Yeah.
There are many parts in the world where they're just like, okay, throw them there. And then they're just rolling around like animals. Animals don't really get trapped. The schooling system, family system, you know, sit down. Could you just stop moving right now? Could you behave? Why are you such a bad boy? Sit there, watch TV, read a book, listen to the lesson plan, get good grades. Can you see why people are going to this right now? What we're doing, we're freeing the mind by freeing the body. It brings us back to the point. That's the point. That's why we're doing this. You have to look at that whole cascade in order to... so one maybe super basic... lost the page. No, I didn't. Gonna just make a new one. Oh, okay, here's maybe the most basic neurological factoid that could be absorbable by people conducting the work that we do. Hebbian learning explains how you make a circuit. When you fire neurons, you basically wire them together. When you fire them together, you wire them together. That's how you make a connection. And do you know how you do that? By moving your body. Every time you move your body a certain way, you make a connection. You're wiring them together because you're firing them together. And the more you do it, that's how you create thought. That's actually how learning begins. That's how you map out the brain circuits. That's Hebbian learning. Later on, maybe we could study spike time dependent plasticity, long-term potentiation, and depression. Those are expensive words, but what they talk about is more on how do you create directionality between neurons. Because maybe this could potentially go there, or this could potentially go there. How do you make a decision? When you move...
So you're saying this Hebbian learning is how you create directionality?
Hebbian learning initially was the observation that when you fire them together, you wire them together. Later, they had to explain how then do you choose which circuits. Either you depress a possible circuit because of fear. That's how depression happens. That's how trauma occurs. Long-term depression occurs when you don't choose to fire certain circuits because you've gone there and you don't want to go there. So long-term potentiation would be the opposite. If you want to go that direction, that's how you form a mind. That's how you create the personality, by potentiating some circuits and depressing other circuits. So now you're not a baby anymore. You've given up a lot of the possible circuitry in favor of the ones that you chose, especially when you were young. So now you are negotiating. Okay, maybe there are ones that I didn't explore because I thought they were scary. I thought there were monsters underneath that bed, ghosts inside the closet. Now you keep opening the ones that you thought were super dark, super scary, or the ones that they said, don't ever go there. But now you're opening, okay, I want to see what's there. Then you make a movement towards there. You could create new circuits through new potentiation. So that's actually the neural theory for learning. That's how you learn. That is literally how you go to school. So that's why this is a school. It doesn't look like a school sometimes, but can you see why this is a school? Just by wiring new connections through new possible movements because of the breaking of pattern, you're learning. You're actually learning from a really deep space. So,
and then, I mean, what you were saying, connecting to what you were saying yesterday about really wanting to create meaningful learning.
Yeah.
You need to kind of go into the endocrine system.
Yeah, I mean all those, but here we will shift more into how meanings are formed. I mean, let's not go into the chemical conversation for now because that's exhausted. So now I guess we can understand what a conceptual metaphor is. So what is a metaphor? A metaphor is, Aristotle was the first one to talk about it. It's when you borrow the qualities of one substance and then you lend it to another, right? You know what a metaphor is. Yeah. It's so basic to us. Give an example of a metaphor. Explain something to the other.
Your eyes are as blue as the color of the ocean.
Yeah, exactly. We all know what it means when you say the sky is crying. It's not emotional, it's just raining. The sky doesn't cry, but you personalize something that's happening in the earth in order to understand mentally and linguistically. You put words that belong in the domain of the other. So conceptual metaphor is actually when you take a conceptual domain and then you move the energy of that into another conceptual domain. So a metaphor then is made up of two conceptual domains or more, and then you transfer the meaning from one to the other. So in translation theory and in embodied cognition, you can say that there is a source domain and there's a target domain. There has to be where the meaning comes from and then where it goes. So in a way, there's a kind of transmission still in this paradigm or this understanding. Each domain needs to be coherent in your mind. It needs to be quite firm that when you mention baby, when you mention love, okay? So here's what I find interesting in embodied cognition. The observation is this, that most source domains are actually concrete. They started in the body. Concrete. Concrete means you sensed it. The baby sensed it. It's a concrete experience, and the target domain becomes an abstract thought. We've spoken about this. Remember, we spoke about love, freedom, beauty, truth. And you don't have in that thought a concrete description of what love looks like. But you have experienced that in your body initially as something concrete. So your thoughts are abstract. Your thoughts live in this dream virtual space, but that actually came from the body first. And then you created your thought system through internal representations, like that Matryoshka doll over there. So when I hold inner dance, I actually follow this. This is my framework. This is what I use in order to decide when I hold the playlist thing, for example. When I choose certain elements in the DJ app or the noise app, I am pulling out image schemas, and then I'm mixing them together to create conceptual metaphors for you to journey through. So I want to give you examples of image schemas that I use that you might find useful if you're interested in them. Remember, these are the first thoughts of a baby. Before a baby thought, it was really going to have to be basic. So if you're going to communicate to a body in the energy process, it can't be abstract. It needs to be very concrete. Vibratory and concrete. It needs to communicate something so simple. Okay? Here's my most basic spatial primitive. I'm a father, so I know this. I observed my children. And this is the most obvious image schema. In inner dance, you can see this in people. Okay, I'll demonstrate it. Okay, what does that mean? That could mean several things, but the more obvious would be the schema I just described is called the containment schema. And so a lot of you probably have spent time with some babies. What do? What they do is they would get something like this. Okay? And then what they do is they do this. And they would do it how many times? And why do they not stop doing it? Okay, and then what they do is they look for other ones and then they put stuff inside, they put stuff outside. What are they learning? An inside and an outside. So that initial learning is called containment. So every time you see someone in the energetic process doing that, you can't learn full or empty, scarcity or abundance without actually initially learning containment. You have to start that basic. You want to talk the language of baby? You need to work with image schemas. Okay, so I'm just going to list down my image schema maps. Containment was one. This is another. Okay, you can draw it in different ways. It can be like this, it can be like this, it can be like this. There are geometries to how we might understand image schemas. This is the language of inner dance in baby. Okay, I'm just going to keep listing these down. Link or linkage, connection. When I choose music, when I hold bodies, this is what I hold. When I choose noise app elements. It helps me to observe what is happening in the movements. And it helps me to parent my kids when I'm helping them to establish wisdom. Twin pan balance. Some of these I'm borrowing from George Lakoff and Mark Johnson. Oh. Oh. Ah, there. Equilibrium. That is it. We're done. I felt that this would be really important to help integrate, to help us check out, to help you maybe land, also to just open the way for really long observation. You could add to these notes, they're really rich, so much out there. But it really helps to come to the point where this is explainable.